Amazing discovery. Senior Officer S. shocking email divorce during flight reveals hidden betrayal. Captain Jake Thompson's heart sank as he read the email that shook him to his very core. I can't do this anymore. Sarah's words echoed in his mind, pulling him away from the murmurs of the cockpit chatter and the hum of the engines. While the aircraft soared high above the flat expanses of the Midwest, he felt an emotional turbulence far worse than any storm outside. He recalled her laughter at the county fair, the way her eyes sparkled when they dreamed of their future together, a future now shattered. With nearly 2 decades in aviation, he understood the intricacies of flight, but this was a flight through heavy emotional fog. His knuckles turned white as he gripped the yoke. He had always prioritized his family, working grueling hours to provide for them, but hadn't he yet also created this chasm between him and Sarah? The realization clawed at his chest. How could the love of his life turn away so easily after everything? The lives they built, his little girl Lily, her art adorning the fridge, rushed through his mind, morphing his hurt into a sharp pang of betrayal as he envisioned them alone without him. As they approached Chicago, a city filled with whispered promises of prosperity, he inwardly battled the two sides of himself: loyal husband versus dedicated pilot. The turbulence he encountered was nothing compared to what he faced internally. He felt trapped in this airspace, unsure whether to confront Sarah the moment he landed, or bury his sorrow beneath protocols and procedures. Each choice churned in his mind a cocktail of hurt, anger, and fear. Unexplainable guilt nestled in his gut. Had he pushed her to this? A nearby crackle of communication momentarily jolted him back to reality. Thompson, you good up there? The voice of his co-pilot pierced through the storm in his mind. Yeah, just thinking, he replied, forcing tension from his voice. But thoughts raced, all directing back to Sarah's shocking confession. He couldn't help but question the authenticity of their marriage. Her affair loomed like clouds he couldn't dodge, blocking the sunlight of years spent building trust. The irony of flying home now struck him hard. Home was meant to be a sanctuary, but it felt like a battleground. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Nervously, he skimmed over the smooth altitudes, unaware he was about to lose grip on everything important in his life. A bump suddenly rocked the aircraft, harnessing his body into a rigid defense against mounting confusion. Was he still a hero, able to navigate crises soaring above the clouds if he couldn't even save the one thing that mattered the most? He could almost see Lily's innocence, oblivious to the rumble of discord waiting to erupt beneath the surface. Jake recognized the inflection point. Every second was a countdown. Would he push through without confrontation or risk unraveling everything? Each passing moment felt like fuel feeding the fire. He gritted his teeth, straining against both the controls and the chaos within him. The landing gear lowered, but would he land safely with his career intact, or scarred with the weight of betrayal? The final descent loomed not just for the aircraft but for his family, leaving Jake desperate for clarity in a storm of lies. Would he emerge as the pilot who conquered the course, or as a man unmoored by his very own heart? As the aircraft touched down, the jarring transition jolted Jake back to the present. The momentary thrill of asphalt beneath tires was overshadowed by the gravity of impending confrontation. He maneuvered the plane to the terminal, every subtle vibration reverberating through his psyche. Would he be able to carry out the debrief, or would looming questions about Sarah's decision derail him entirely? Once parked, Jake glanced at his co-pilot, eager but unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. You did well today, Jake, his co-pilot remarked, nonchalantly folding away the flight manual. But Jake felt detached from the praise. What he had done in the cockpit felt meaningless compared to the impending chaos of his home life. A part of him fought against the feeling of inadequacy, the deep-seated belief that he should be able to control not only the aircraft but also the trajectory of his family. The cool air washed over him as he stepped out onto the tarmac, and he reveled in the crispness for just a moment. However, reality crashed around him as he grabbed his bag, the weight of it a reminder of the burdens he carried, both emotional and familial. As he crossed the threshold from the cockpit to the terminal, the familiar scent of engine oil and jet fuel enveloped him, yet neither could soothe the swirling tempest within. Jake found himself at the baggage area, mechanically retrieving his belongings while his mind spiraled. Each lifeless suitcase was an echo of the life he thought he had, a structure built on mutual trust now compromised by betrayal. The way Sarah had ended it left him fumbling for understanding, desperate to grasp the why behind her decision. His phone buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a message from Sarah, instructing him to meet at their favorite diner. The irony struck him like daggers. That diner had always been a place of laughter and plans, now it felt more like a trial ground for his very existence. He could choose to give in, to indulge in the sweet comfort of nostalgia, or summon the resolve to face the harshness of the truth. The drive to the diner felt interminable. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, painting a deceptive picture of tranquility. Inside, it was the same old establishment, with its retro decor and the hum of familiar chatter. Yet, the smiles of others dulled in contrast to his fraying heartstrings. Sarah sat at a booth, her body language representing both familiarity and caution. As he approached, he couldn't shake the fleeting image of their past intertwined in moments filled with warmth and laughter. But now, they were frayed edges of a tapestry, pulled apart by unspoken words. He slid into the booth, examining her face for any hint of the discussion to follow. Would she meet his gaze with remorse or defiance? His heart thrummed like an engine powered up for flight, ready to take off but unsure of the destination. "You got my email," she stated softly, her voice tinged with uncertainty. He nodded, every anxious second stretching into an eternity. Jake realized that this might be more than just a conversation. This was the make-or-break moment where he could either reclaim or relinquish what mattered most. Why? The single word escaped his lips as though it had been held back by invisible strings. The weight of that question hung between them, potent and raw, each syllable a plea for truth. Would he finally unearth the reason behind her betrayal, or be met with excuses that would only deepen the chasm of hurt? The kitchen clatter faded, and all he could sense was the anticipated response hanging in the air. Jake prepared himself for a pivotal declaration, one that could redefine both their lives. Would they explore the wreckage of their relationship together, or would they drift further apart, shadows of what once was? The moment stretched, ripe with possibility and dread, and as he sat waiting for her answer, a deep resolve was emerging inside him, driving him to confront not just her choices but also his own truth. The moment of honesty hung heavy over their heads, the potential for deep transformation lingering. What would he discover about himself and his capacity for forgiveness? The diner's walls felt semi-transparent, revealing glimpses of the future that lay ahead, uncertain yet ignited by the flicker of hope if only he had the courage to chase it. The silence between them was thick, charged with unexpressed feelings and fears. Just as Jake's mind began to wander into the churning waters of doubt, Sarah looked up, her deep brown eyes locked onto his with a mixture of vulnerability and defiance. It was as if she had been waiting for him to step off the precipice first, and now, the moment was here. "Jake," she started, her voice cracking slightly under the weight of the confession, "I didn't want to hurt you. It just happened." For small words, yet they unwound something within him. Could it be that simple? Did her betrayal stem from a moment's weakness or a series of poor choices he had failed to notice? He felt the familiar stirrings of anger and confusion begin to claw at him. Would he allow her evasive language to shape his response? He clenched his fists beneath the table to ground himself, a small gesture meant to convey the storm raging inside. "But why did you find comfort somewhere else?" he questioned, the hurt bleeding through his usually steady tone. "Why couldn't you come to me?" She shifted, her eyes dropping momentarily. "I thought it was over, Jake." "I thought we were over," she admitted, and her admission struck a chord deep within him. "I was lost, and he was there." There. The mere mention of another man sent a wave of resentment crashing over him. He could feel his stomach knotting, but instead of letting the anger twist his words into a weapon, Jake decided to lean into the disorienting light of understanding. He swallowed hard. "I wasn't there for you," he conceded, almost as if he were speaking to himself as much as he was to her. I was so caught up in work, in flying. I thought being a good provider was enough. Maybe it wasn't. There was a resolve in her response that intrigued and angered him simultaneously. Did she believe she could justify her actions this way? Yet, deep down, Jake realized that this moment was critical not for airing grievances but for unearthing hidden truths about himself and their relationship. He was confronting his own shortcomings, and with each admission, he felt layers of defensiveness peeling away. As they engaged in this delicate dance of revelation, flashes of stark realization began flickering in his mind. What he thought was an absolute betrayal was, in part, rooted in years of neglect fueled by his relentless pursuit of perfection and safety in his career. Was he merely scapegoating her for the failures in his own life? "Sarah," he said slowly, wrestling with the surge of raw emotion, "I want to understand, not just accuse. If we're going to figure this out, then I need to know if you're willing to face it together. No more hiding. We need clarity." Her gaze met his with a sense of weight. "I don't know if that's possible. I'm not sure I can go back." The words hung between them, an echo of the uncertainty of their future. Yet as he listened, Kyle realized this struggle wasn't just about their relationship. It was an invitation to redefine who he was as a partner, as a person. Just then, the waitress arrived, oblivious to the tempest they were weathering. She placed their drinks on the table, and the clatter drew both Jake and Sarah briefly back to reality. Cold perspiration dotted Jake's brow, tinged with the realization that professionalism in the air didn't shield him from emotional turbulence on land. "Do you think we can get back what we lost?" he asked, his voice lower, searching her eyes for a flicker of hope. "I want to try," Sarah replied, her determination surprising him. Their game of emotional chess was shaping up to be a battle of wills, but Jake finally sensed he was ready to engage. They had both choices to make and roads to navigate. What had once appeared to be an insurmountable rift now glimmered under the light of potential reconciliation. The deeper questions loomed larger. Could he evolve from this not just for the sake of their relationship but for himself? Would he unearth a part of him that had long been buried beneath layers of fidelity to ambition? As he contemplated the challenges ahead, a profound silence settled as they both sipped their drinks. The weight of unresolved feelings lingered like the dim echoes of their past. In that moment of quiet, an inner voice emerged, stronger than before, a justifiable urgency to not only salvage what was left but to become more. Knowing there could be new challenges tied to the path of reconciliation was daunting, but he felt an ember of hope ignite within him. And as they sat lost in thought amidst the din of conversations, the specter of uncertainty stood watch. What corner would his path turn to next, and could he truly embrace the change he needed? The choice between facing the tumultuous storm or remaining bound to the past loomed larger than ever. As the conversations buzzed around them, Jake felt the weight of his own desperation, a conflict that churned in his heart. Did he want to salvage what was left of their relationship at the cost of denying his own needs? The threads of their shared history, woven together with laughter and tears, now threatened to unravel into something unrecognizable. "Sarah," he began anew, searching for the right words, "what do you think is broken in us?" Did he even have the right to ask that, given the damage done? "I know what I've neglected, but I need to understand your mind before we can move forward. You took a step away from us, I need to know why." Her breath caught as she hid behind the veil of uncertainty. "I didn't feel valued, Jake," she admitted, each syllable fracturing the facade she had maintained. "You were always so immersed in your work that I felt invisible. I wanted to be a priority, not just an obligation." The mirror of her words reflected back not just her pain but his failure to see. He had understood ambition as a pathway to success, never realizing how it had loomed over their relationship like a shadow. This shadow had reached out, discovered a yearning in Sarah's heart, and given it a home elsewhere. He could see it now. The moments lost to late nights and last-minute flights had built a wall that he had never intended to erect. "I'm aware of how my choices led to that," he replied, swallowing his pride and vulnerability. "I was too focused on doing everything right that I forgot what mattered most." She met his gaze with a mix of grief and resolve. "Do you really want to change, Jake? Or is this just about saving face?" The question struck like a lightning bolt, illuminating the deeper implications of their conversation. Jake leaned forward, fists pressed together. It's not just about us, it's about me becoming someone better. I don't want to be the man who lost you because he thought flying high above was worth more than standing by your side. The sincerity in his voice pierced through her defenses, but doubt still flickered in her eyes. We can't just flip a switch and make everything better, and I'm scared, too. That admission echoed through him, revealing the same fear that had weighed on his heart. This was no longer about laying blame, it was about the mutual desire to break free from the patterns that had ensnared them. Then let us take it one step at a time. I'm willing to work on myself, but I need you to help me understand what that looks like from your side. Her hesitation softened as she absorbed his sincerity, and he could feel the tension begin to thaw. This was scary territory, but that fear was also the gateway to something more profound, a possibility of growth rather than deterioration. All right, she replied softly, I'll try. But we need to set boundaries, to create space for each other, instead of clinging to what we think we should be. Jake nodded, an unexpected thrill surging through him. They were in this together, but clarity was still a distant horizon. They needed a plan, a way to bridge the gap, reinvent their commitment without the shadows of resentment clouding their path. As their conversation unfolded, Jake envisioned their future, one filled with open communication and shared dreams, an oasis where misunderstandings could no longer thrive. Yet a question nagged at the back of his mind. How deep did the fractures run? In the depths of this transformative moment, a wave of anxiety washed over him. With the potential to unearth buried desires and wounds alike, every revelation could lead to new possibilities or steep pitfalls. The prospect of exploring this unfamiliar territory was both exhilarating and daunting. Are we ready for this? He pondered, feeling an unsettling tangle of excitement and dread. Would they be able to navigate through discomfort without slipping back into old patterns? As he grappled with those questions, his phone buzzed on the table, slicing through the fragile atmosphere. Distracted, he glanced at the notification, a curious itch of premonition tugged at him. Who from work? Needed him now? But as he swiped to unlock it, his heart sank. The email subject line promised revelations that could shatter even the glimmers of hope they were nurturing. The time had come to face something altogether unexpected. What had he overlooked that now threatened to punctuate their fragile dance of reconnection with yet another betrayal? Jake's hand hovered over the phone, dread creeping into his gut as he considered the email's implications. The very idea that the fragile peace he had just started to forge with Sarah might come crashing down felt unbearable. Gripped by a sense of urgency, he pressed the screen and opened the message, his pulse quickening with every millisecond. The subject line was blunt, a cold slap, meeting update, immediate attention required. He swallowed against a knot in his throat. Scanning the email, he felt his heart drop. A full restructuring of the team had been announced, and names were being tossed around like confetti. Among them, his was the primary one, mentioned a promotion that came with strings attached, tasks that would pull him further away from home. The irony stung. Just when he had begun to realize what truly mattered, the universe was setting up another obstacle. He read on, detail after detail cascading like a torrent. Glimpses of business metrics, objectives, future pros and cons. It all spun in a dizzying mix in his mind. Not once did it acknowledge the personal toll, the implication that he would be expected to prioritize work over everything else again, including his attempt to salvage his relationship. The bitter taste of inconsistency sat heavy on his tongue. Jake? Sarah's voice cut through his spiraling thoughts. He turned to find her looking at him, her expression tinged with concern. What is it? He hesitated, toggling between shielding her from the storm of his work life and the potential for greater trust through transparency. She deserved honesty, and yet the potential repercussions loomed large. Just work, he said, his voice betraying him as he retained a tight grip on the phone. Sarah's eyebrows knit together, revealing the doubt that lay beneath his simple words. Is it good work? Bad? She pressed, and he was keenly aware that this was a pivotal point, the first test of their newfound commitment to openness. The slip of honesty could set a precedent, and yet vulnerability frightened him. He raked a hand through his hair, feeling the weight of the truth press like an anchor. They're restructuring the team, and they want me to take on more responsibilities. Her eyes narrowed as she processed the implications. More responsibilities? Is that what you need right now? The unspoken questions hung in the air like the thick fog outside their window. Could he juggle the demands of his career while healing their fractured connection? He wanted to yell that he didn't need more responsibilities, he needed time. Time to rebuild. Time to show her that he had not only recognized his past mistakes but was actively trying to change. Instead, the burden of professional ambition loomed like a trap. In that moment, he faced a critical decision point. I'm unsure, he admitted, and guilt twisted in his core. Part of me wants to take the opportunity. It's everything I've worked for. Sarah's gaze turned steely, and Jake felt a flicker of fear that this could unravel everything. But at what cost? She asked, her voice low but holding a certain strength. The prospect of losing her again made his heart race. I told you I want to do better, but and what about the work that made you lose sight of us in the first place? The sincerity in her voice tethered him in a spiral of introspection. Faced with the choice between career advancement and personal fulfillment, he was lost in the chasm of uncertainty. He realized he had to confront not only his ambitions but also, perhaps, the nature of success itself. What good were accolades if he was destitute in the only relationship that truly mattered? Maybe I need to redefine what success looks like, he mused aloud, uncertainty lacing every word. Then let us do it together. But you have to be ready to stand by that commitment and not let ambition take the wheel again. In her challenge, he felt the flickering hope of mutual growth. Could he navigate this rocky terrain without sacrificing their bond, this delicate balance of evolution? The very essence of personal growth was at stake. And every revelation unfolded new layers of fear and possibility. In that moment, a decision began to take shape within him, a fraying strand pulling taut. With Sarah's gaze unwavering, he realized that the next step would demand a seismic shift not just in his career but in how he viewed his place in the world. What lay beyond this moment of reckoning? Just then, his phone buzzed again, the vibration echoing through the charged atmosphere. The second email from work, promising new revelations. Could this one shatter their bond entirely? The screen flickered with the arrival of the next email, and Jake's heart caught in his throat as he hesitated to open it. A tightening knot of anxiety coiled within him. What more could they possibly demand? The current conversation with Sarah hung heavily in the air while he felt the weight of the future teetering on tonight's decisions. Jake? Sarah's voice, now laced with urgency, momentarily pulled him from the digital abyss. Are you going to read it? Yeah, I just need a moment. But urgency gnawed at him. Each second wasted felt like another tick on a countdown. Taking a breath, he clicked the email open. The words scrolled before his eyes like a grocery list of impossible demands. The company was not only restructuring, they were implementing new key performance indicators, and they needed him to align his team to meet these goals with short notice. The crux of the matter hung cruelly above the title: immediate results expected, no exceptions. Every expectation felt like a noose tightening around his ability to breathe, let alone perform professionally or personally. Jake closed the phone, eyes darting to Sarah. She observed him closely, dissecting his every move with the intuitive skill he had come to appreciate. This moment was pivotal, and he could almost see the battle between his professional facade and personal growth swirling inside. Talk to me, Jake, she urged, pushing him. What's in it? It's bad, he answered, wrestling to convey his turmoil. They want me to take responsibility for a complete overhaul of the team performance metrics. It's going to demand every ounce of me. Sarah stepped closer, her tone shifting from concern to quiet strength. And how do you feel about that? The question reverberated with an intensity that struck at the heart of his internal conflict. He wanted to yell that he felt trapped, suffocated by ambition that had cost him so dearly. Yet all he could muster was a raw honesty. I feel like I'm being pulled back into that churn of excessive workloads, where everything comes before my personal life. Her features softened, and she reached for his hand. Then don't do it. You have a choice. A choice. How often had he forgotten that essential power in pursuit of success? The realization was unsettling. He was aware of the all-consuming drive to achieve, but Sarah's grounding presence awakened something deep within him, a sense of self that had become obscured. "What about my career?" he replied, wrestling with the duality of ambition and relationship. "This could be my big break." "But at what cost, Jake?" she countered, her eyes unwavering. "Is it worth sacrificing what's most important?" Silence enveloped them, heavy with unspoken realizations. He could reach for that promotion, but what would remain of his happiness? In that moment, he saw a flicker of clarity. Maybe this conquest for accolades wasn't the definition of winning after all. Maybe it was time to create his terms of success, one that intertwined his career with what mattered most: Sarah, their growth, a shared journey. "I need to talk to my supervisor," he stated, his spine straightening as confidence bubbled to the surface. "Now?" Sarah's surprise mingled with pride. "Yes, now," he affirmed, feeling the resoluteness of the decision invigorate him. "If I'm going to redefine success, I need to take that first step." As he turned to grab his phone, adrenaline surged through his veins. This was a pivotal moment, not just for his career, but for his life. Just then, the phone buzzed again, a message marked urgent from his supervisor. Tension swelled. Would this bring an opportunity for a transformative conversation, or complicate the path he just decided? Jake stared at the screen, bracing himself for the possible fallout of a crucial decision that could alter the course of his life. What awaited him on the other side of this message? Was he truly prepared to confront the demands of his career while securing the foundations of love he desperately wished to rebuild? Jake stared at the screen, pulse racing, his mind an unsettling whirlpool of thoughts. What if the urgent email contained more demands? What if it was an ultimatum? The uncertainty clawed at him, yet he couldn't ignore the sense that this single moment held power far beyond the office's typical grind. With a resolute breath, he unlocked the message. The words leapt off the screen, formal and clipped, laden with expectation. His supervisor outlined the urgency to meet with him, a review of his previous quarter's achievements paired with plans for the upcoming transformation. Jake's heart sank further. He could sense the stakes rising even without the dark undercurrents of manipulation that once guided their hands. "Is this what success looks like?" he whispered to himself, closing the phone for a moment to gather his thoughts. Sarah's words lingered in the air, reverberating with a profound truth he could no longer ignore. He needed to navigate this moment with an understanding beyond mere career advancement. "Are you okay?" Sarah asked softly, her presence a balm to his raging nerves. "Yeah, I just need to prepare," he said, forcing himself to absorb the weight of his responsibilities. With a deep breath, he stood. "This isn't just about metrics. It's about how I'll lead my team moving forward." There was a flicker of uncertainty in Sarah's eyes, one he recognized. She had always believed in the potential of his leadership but likely felt the tension gnawing at his resolve. "You know they won't make it easy, right?" she reminded him. "This is their way of testing you." Jake nodded, acutely aware of the corporate landscape he was navigating. "That's why I need to approach this differently. I need to show them I'm more than just another cog in the machine." He moved to the mirror, straightening his shirt, a ritualistic preparation for the conversation ahead. As he studied his reflection, Jake contemplated the years that had driven him to this point, the relentless pursuit of success deeply intertwined with the sacrifices that now loomed over him. The time had come to face not only his supervisor but also the entangled emotions circling his ambitions. He had been a player in a ruthless game, unaware of his role until this very moment. With each passing day, he recognized the truth: sacrifice does not equate to success if it comes at the cost of his spirit. "Jake, you've always succeeded when you've been true to yourself," Sarah said, her voice steady, prying open the cracks in his doubt. "Find that truth in this situation. They'll have to recognize your worth." Her encouragement acted as a catalyst, allowing clarity to build amidst doubt. He envisioned how he would frame the conversation. Instead of merely explaining how he would align his team with the new metrics, he could outline a vision, one that balanced performance with team morale. This was a fresh opportunity, not just for him, but for those who relied on him for their growth. "Thank you, Sarah," he replied with newfound determination, preparing to disentangle himself from corporate expectations that had loomed over their lives. With one last glance at the screen, Jake felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. The email hadn't defined his worth. The moment to articulate his vision confidently awaited. As he walked toward the door, adrenaline surged. This was no longer just a conversation about metrics, it was about direction and leadership integrity. He would confront the challenge head-on, advocating for a system based on true growth rather than superficial accomplishments. Just as he opened the door, a chilling thought struck him. Was he ready to face the very real possibility that this conversation could churn through career-limiting decisions? Would he find strength in articulating his values amidst the department's demands? Jake paused, heart pounding with anticipation, realizing he was on the brink of something monumental. Would he affirm his vision for a better workplace, or would he retreat behind the comfortable facade of compliance? Jake stepped into the brightly lit conference room, the hum of fluorescent lights mingling with his racing thoughts. His supervisor sat at the head of the long table, an insurmountable distance between them that mirrored the growing chasm in Jake's mind between who he was and who he aspired to be. "Glad you could make it, Jake," his supervisor initiated, a tone that seemed more rehearsed than genuine. Jake swallowed hard, keenly aware of the paper-thin layer of confidence he was trying to project. "Thanks for the opportunity," Jake replied, forcing a steadiness into his voice. He settled into the chair across the table, its coldness a stark contrast to the warmth of motivation he sought to harness. His supervisor leaned forward, eyeing Jake closely. "Let's dive in. I want to hear your thoughts on your last quarter and how you propose to integrate our new objectives moving forward." The moment of truth had arrived. Jake took a breath, feeling the rush of adrenaline as he recalled Sarah's encouragement. He wasn't here to recite figures or blindly comply. He wanted to share his vision not just for the metrics, but for his team, for genuine connections that would yield sustainable success. "While our metrics have certainly improved," he began, projecting authority, "I believe we can gain even more by cultivating a collaborative environment. To truly innovate, our team needs to feel empowered and supported. It's not just about the end goals. It's about how we get there." His supervisor raised an eyebrow but remained silent, allowing Jake to press further. "I've been doing some thinking, and I realize that success shouldn't just be measured by numbers, but also by personal growth and team morale," Jake continued, finding a rhythm. "If our team is motivated on a personal level, they'll not only hit those metrics but exceed them." The words flowed from him, and with each concept articulated, he felt the shackles of self-doubt loosening. Yet he couldn't shake the lingering apprehension about how this unorthodox perspective would be received. His supervisor nodded slowly, jotting down notes without any hint of enthusiasm. "That's interesting. But do you really believe that feeling good about work translates to performance? Isn't that a bit idealistic?" Jake's stomach tightened at the dismissive tone. He had anticipated skepticism, but the sting was sharper than expected. It forced him to confront a harsh reality about the boundaries of corporate culture. "Yes, I think it does," he asserted, his voice strengthening as he leaned into the discomfort. "In my experience, teams that feel respected and valued are more engaged and committed. It isn't just theory, it's what I've seen firsthand." The silence that followed felt heavy, oppressive. Jake could see his supervisor calculating, weighing his words against corporate narratives built around rigid performance metrics. This wasn't just an exchange, it was a personal crusade against norms he had come to detest. What happens when you throw marketing buzzwords into the mix? Engagement is hard to quantify. "The board wants numbers," the supervisor challenged, attempting to push Jake back into the role of the compliant employee with nothing more than analytics to speak for him. Jake inhaled deeply, refusing to spiral into despair. "We can still track tangible outcomes while fostering this environment. I'm suggesting a dual approach. If we invest in our people, we'll see that investment reflected in our results." His supervisor's expression remained enigmatic, a mask that revealed nothing. Yet Jake sensed the slightest shift in the atmosphere, a ripple of curiosity mingled with tension. After all, he dared to defy conventional thinking, and whether it was understood today or not, that choice marked a pivotal moment in his growth as a leader. Interesting, his supervisor finally said, non-committal, but a spark of acknowledgement flickered in his eyes. As the conversation wound toward its conclusion, Jake felt a renewed surge within him. He had managed to speak his truth for the first time in a setting defined by conformity. The realization washed over him. He had to be willing to navigate uncharted waters, even if the tides of skepticism threatened to pull him under. The meeting ended, and as Jake walked out, adrenaline continued to course through him. What had begun as an intimidating confrontation had shifted into a journey of self-discovery. Yet, thoughts of impending resistance lingered on the horizon. What would happen next? Would he embrace the power of vulnerability and continue advocating for change, or would the weight of expectations pull him into silence once again? As he exited the building, uncertainty loomed, but a new fire ignited within him. The answer awaited just beyond the next conversation. Jake slid into his small cubicle, the hum of office machinery forming an oddly comforting backdrop as he attempted to ground himself after the confrontation. He felt the thrum of possibility and the weight of apprehension coalesce within him, creating a tension that was almost palpable. Sure, he had spoken his truth, but now the implications loomed larger than life. Grabbing a notebook, Jake aimed for clarity. The ink flowed more freely than he expected as he jotted down his thoughts about the meeting. Each word felt like a step toward solidifying his newfound perspective. A collaborative environment, he wrote, where ideas were valued beyond mere metrics. Was this how leadership transformed? He couldn't help but question the ingrained corporate culture that seemed to prioritize numbers over the details of human connection. Yet, underneath the thrill of defiance was a gnawing fear. What if he was wrong? What if embracing vulnerability shattered any career aspirations he harbored? With a sigh, he closed the notebook, frustration simmering. He needed to find a way to marry his vision with the unforgiving reality of corporate expectations. Jake leaned back and let the chair cradle him momentarily, seeking solace in the rhythm of his own thoughts. It's not just about making a case for empathy in the workplace, it's about an entire paradigm shift. He started to envision meetings where voices blossomed into dialogue, where creativity could flourish unfettered by bureaucratic constraints. How could he initiate this change without being labeled as too idealistic or, worse, risking his job? The ticking of the clock slid into his focus, marking the seconds that felt like hours. He needed guidance or at least a sounding board for these burgeoning ideas. That thought led him to Sarah. She had an uncanny ability to distill complex thoughts into actionable strategies, and her belief in him had sparked this journey forward. Jake quickly tapped out a message on his phone, requesting a coffee meeting. The hours to the scheduled coffee felt endless, each tick accompanied by a mix of excitement and anxiety. Would Sarah see the potential he glimpsed? As he paced in his mind, ideas collided like molten metal, forging a clearer vision of what a successful team could become if transparency was prioritized. When they finally met at a quaint cafe, Jake greeted her with a nervous smile, keenly aware that he was counting on her expertise to shape his aspirations. Over warm mugs, he recounted his meeting, the courageous steps he took, and the feedback he received. "What do you think?" he asked, his heart thumping in anticipation of her response. Sarah's eyes sparkled with enthusiasm, reflecting both support and deep contemplation. "You've made great strides," she began, "but changing minds requires more than theory. You need tangible examples that illustrate outcomes. Stories of success from environments that prioritize morale that's what you're up against." Jake chewed his lip, accepting the challenge embedded in her words. He had to be more than a dreamer pinpointing a new horizon. He needed to offer practical, evidence-based strategies. How could he inspire others while demonstrating effective leadership? Emboldened by this unexpected clarity, he sketched out a plan. What if I initiated a small project? An experimental team meeting where everyone shares ideas without judgment? He suggested, leaning into the enthusiasm that was building within him. Exactly. Use that to gather data, maybe even conduct surveys afterward. Show how engagement translates to performance. Jake nodded, his confidence growing alongside his vision. There was a palpable shift in his mindset. This was more than his role. It was an opportunity to redefine what leadership meant in his workplace. As their conversation continued, he felt a transformation within him catalyzed by Sarah's insight. She had not only validated his perspective but set the stage for him to act upon it. But as they parted ways, and reality slipped back over him, an unsettling thought squeezed through his triumph. What if the corporate structure resisted change? What if the very people he intended to inspire dismissed his efforts? The questions shadowed him as he made his way back to the office, this newfound purpose competing with the ghost of self-doubt lingering just behind. Would he find the resilience to lead this charge? Jake pushed through the office doors, determination sharpening his focus. The time had come to embrace his ambition fully, to challenge the tide of convention. Deep down, however, he understood that political maneuvering would be required, and he would need allies to stand against the inevitable pushback. The stakes were higher than he realized, and as he settled back at his desk, another email alert popped up, this one from his supervisor, potentially veiled with more skepticism than solutions. Would this be an obstacle or an opportunity? That crucial answer awaited him with one simple click. Jake opened the email from his supervisor with an equal mix of dread and anticipation. The familiar corporate jargon greeted him, yet the contents held a specific directive, a follow-up meeting on the recent team restructuring and performance expectations. A sharp pang of anxiety coursed through him as he braced for what the conversation would demand. As he prepared for the meeting, he couldn't shake the belief that this was an inflection point not only for his career but for who he was becoming as a leader. Over the past few weeks, he'd shed layers of old assumptions that had defined his ambition, and now it was time to present a new narrative. Stepping into the conference room, he recognized the necessity of balancing professionalism with authenticity. Jake understood that he had to walk the line between corporate expectations and the human touch he wanted to cultivate. "Glad to see you, Jake," his supervisor said, attempting to mask the undercurrent of skepticism in his tone. "I wanted to discuss your thoughts on our last conversation and your proposals for the team." Jake took a breath, feeling a swell of determination. He reminded himself of the collaborative atmosphere he aspired to create, the synergy that could redefine his team's frame of success. "Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate the chance to share my vision," he began, anchored by clarity. He outlined his ideas, focusing on team engagement through shared responsibility, illustrating with examples he had observed in the industry. He threaded it together meticulously, how empowerment would translate into increased productivity and innovation. He felt the sincerity of his message rooting deeper within him as he spoke. His supervisor listened with a mix of skepticism and curiosity, eyebrows furrowing at various points. But Jake pressed on, determined that if he presented his case with conviction, perhaps he could unearth a possibility of collaboration instead of opposition. "Engagement leads to performance," he reiterated. "When team members feel valued, they invest in their roles. They seek solutions, rather than just completing tasks." There was a pause, and Jake sensed the shift. The air grew thick with a contemplative silence. Yet before he could capitalize on his momentum, his supervisor leaned forward. "That's all well and good, Jake. But numbers don't lie, and we still need tangible results. Are you confident enough to lead with this approach?" The question coaxed a deeper resolve within him. "I believe that results don't grow in a vacuum. To achieve those numbers, we need a foundation of trust, connection, and enthusiasm among the team. If promoted, I'd like to pilot a small team initiative to gather data on engagement and performance metrics." A glimmer of acknowledgement flickered across his supervisor's face, a minuscule approval buried beneath layers of bureaucracy. "You're suggesting a kind of trial experiment?" "Yes," Jake affirmed, "a trial experiment that aligns performance with human experience. A chance to create a sustainable model that reflects our values as an organization, not just targets we reach for." His supervisor straightened up, clearly intrigued, yet the vagueness of approval still cast a shadow. "We'll see how the numbers play out, but I admit it's an interesting angle. Make sure to document everything carefully." As the meeting wrapped, Jake felt an exhilarating surge of accomplishment. There had been tension, yes, but he had maintained the integrity of his vision through the labyrinth of corporate red tape. He exited the room with more than a hint of optimism. He had laid the groundwork for a more nuanced approach to leadership. The days that followed transformed into a whirlwind of collaboration as Jake began to implement his trial experiment. He mapped out an engagement plan, fostering an environment where every voice was celebrated. Slowly, he witnessed a vibrant change. Ideas flowed freely, creativity flourished, and as he integrated feedback loops into the structure, enthusiasm bubbled among his team members. As results began to manifest, reflecting both improved performance metrics and enhanced morale, Jake glided through the corporate environment with growing confidence. He felt the weight lift and began to redefine success not solely through achievements, but by the connections he fostered. Months later, as the sun streamed through his office window, he received an email detailing the outcomes of his initiative, a promotion, highlighting not just his performance but his fresh take on leadership. It was a validating endorsement not just for his career, but as a testament to his growth as a person. He took a moment to breathe, reflecting on the journey, the initial turmoil, the renegotiation of values, and the commitment to show up not just as a professional but as a true leader. In reclaiming his ambition, he had forged a new identity that embraced vulnerability, collaboration, and genuine achievement. Jake was no longer just a pilot navigating the skies, he was a steadfast guide, steering his team through storms, empowering them to take ownership alongside him. With each passing day, he felt solid confidence and recognized competence radiate from him. As he opened the door to leave, he noted the subtle weight of achievement, closing ranks with fulfillment rather than fame. This wasn't merely a professional milestone, it was a personal revolution, a conquest of self-awareness and growth. Jake emerged not just as a decorated officer in his field, but as a renewed partner, a father ready to nurture Lily's aspirations, and a husband prepared to explore the depths of understanding with Sarah. Now, he looked forward to every landing not just of aircraft, but of relationships knit together through shared aspirations. There would always be challenges, but he'd established a resolution, to rise above, adapt, and transform through communication and trust. As he stepped into his future, one thing remained clear: this was his time. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, it truly makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to support the channel, and your engagement matters.